Hi, welcome to the Scientistsage Sangha. I'm Nancy Anderson Dolan with Wise Heart Wellness, and we're inviting you to talk with us tonight about the topic of change. And this is one of my favorite topics because I have struggled with it lots of my life, and I've had to learn a lot about it. So let's just jump in and start talking about change and what we mean when we say change is there will be some circumstance of our lives that causes a ripple. And that ripple may take us places we don't like. And so it could be something as simple as 40 degrees below weather that's in for a week, or it might be something internal in us. We might have something happen in our mind or in our body that causes changes for us, how we experience the world. So these changes could be external ones, internal ones. They could be ones we choose, and they might be ones that just sort of happen to us. The reality is that the minute we're born, we start to change. Well, the minute we're conceived, technically, we start to change. And we don't stop until we die. And so change is this one constant through our lives. But we tend to react to it more as this thing that things don't change. And we're like, oh no, when they do. When truly, if you're really mindful, really present, things are changing all the time. And it's really wonderful. I have shamanic teachers that have taught me to really take in the change of seasons and how it changes day by day. And where I live, the sun moves around in the sky. It goes much further into the south during the winter and then more overhead during the summer and spring. And so I really notice those kinds of things and the different kinds of flowers. I can't name them at all. I just notice they're there as they come along in the spring. And it's a wonderful way to sort of move into change and flow with it, getting reconnected to nature. Because when we get disconnected from change, when we try and move out of the flow, we can move to sort of one side of the river of life or the other. And one can be really rigid, like we don't want things to change, holding on tight and pushing against things. And the other can be, oh, what the hell, we just go all over the place because everything's changing anyway. So this constant movement between chaos and rigidity. And the moderate middle is really finding ways to embrace change, enjoy change, move with the change that is there, and intentionally put changes we might like out there. It doesn't mean we'll get them, as we'll talk about that quite a bit more later on. But there is a difference when we engage change consciously. We actually have a physiological difference that happens in our bodies when we do that. I had a lot of change starting in 2014. My youngest son moved away, and my mom passed away, and the way you conducted business in the city that I'm in changed really dramatically over a few short weeks. All sorts of things like that happened. And my parents had gotten Alzheimer's before that, so that was a big change as well. And so many things. And my brain literally didn't have enough bandwidth. And so as things went on and sort of kept changing at that really fast pace, my brain slowed down and it couldn't function as well as it could before. And then the pandemic came along and I had to literally give up my offices because we couldn't have people coming in and those things. And so the way that I worked changed a lot. Couldn't leave my house, of course, like everybody else, all the sorts more changes. And it really hasn't been until this last year and a half, 2 years, where I've worked really hard on my physical brain to overcome the effect of all those changes that I've been resisting. Because when we first see change off in the distance even, or if it happens right here, it happens back here in our amygdala, in that base part of the brain. And it says, change is dangerous. And our body goes, oh no, our brain has told us that change is dangerous. we better do things down here to accommodate that. And really what it is literally accommodating by changing how you digest food and all sorts of things. If we stay in that view of change and that first sort of, oh no, things are different. But luckily, using the hand model of the brain, if you haven't seen it before, it is just this part down here is your brainstem, your amygdala, your emotions are in here, and it would be better if we had another thumb to put in there, but this will work. And then this is prefrontal cortex. And so this is really useful to have the prefrontal cortex come down and calm down the amygdala, saying, you know what, maybe this change could be a good thing. Or, we really don't control this change. It'll be all right. Things might be different, but there might be some opportunities here. So literally, we need our prefrontal cortex to be involved in change. And in my experience, there was too many changes coming too fast. My prefrontal cortex couldn't keep up. It just literally couldn't keep up. And the chemicals changed in my brain, so my neurons did not fire as well. And so trying to keep up with poorly firing neurons and a lot of change was a real problematic time. So literally, there's many things we can do, but I really talk to people about working with change first on that real biological level. And you might need to do things to calm your body, like using supplements like magnesium to actually calm your body. You might do things like spend more time in nature where we can sort of align with change, and change is a little slower, and we can get comforted. And we go, oh, okay, the trees are still here. Maybe my life has changed, but the trees are still here. And maybe the trees are changing, their leaves are changing, but we've been through this before, and we know things will move forward. And there's a lot of nonverbal, very subtle cues in nature that help us go through change. And that's why it's just such a useful thing that my son, when he would cry a lot, I would literally step outside on the front step and he would stop crying. He'd be looking at the trees that were in front of our house. And that's what we're like. And it has to be a little more conscious. So we have to get ourselves dressed and go out and stop the busy brain that the amygdala says, but what if this happens? But what if that happens? I don't like that happening. It has lots of opinions down there. And they just come up and fill up our prefrontal cortex if we're not consciously aware and choosing different thoughts about change. So this idea that the only constant is change can be really helpful. And we can say to our brain, of course things are changing. That's how life goes. But let's see where these changes are going to take us. Or are there things that we can do to move with the flow of change or redirect things for ourselves a little bit? Because we are co-creators in it. We're not just helpless, floating down the thing on like poo on a upside down honey jar. We can actually do a little more steering than that. So this idea is really the optional part about change, is that how we meet it, what particular way we choose to meet change. And we can go through the reacting and literally calm our bodies, see what's going on, and we might think about the possibilities, or we might talk to people about what they think about them. But really, that next part is just really engaging the prefrontal cortex and going, what does this look like? Not in terms of how can I stay safe and make it go back to the way it was? Not like that, but really just investigating and exploration. Because creativity is another huge tool to use with change. And so if you might be wanting to go out for a walk and all of a sudden there's a lot of rain, your brain might go, oh, it might be fun to walk in this place. That it might be fun to walk in the rain. Let me find my boots. And so you might be very happily going out and walking in the rain then. So it really matters that you take your brain and you orient your reaction. So this idea about it perception of change to begin with can be a great place to start, sort of like your multi-purpose tool. So if I go along and think, change is this really normal thing that happens, and I can flow with it, and there are always opportunities. Good business people are rarely looking back at what isn't happening anymore. They're looking forward to what could be the new opportunity in the way things are going at the moment. And so if we're walking along like that and really opening up, we look at what we cannot impact and we look at what we can impact. And a lot of the time, what we can impact is a very small circle around us. And so we might be able to impact our breathing, calming our body. We might be able to, turn on lights in our house if gets dark outside. We might be able to talk to my adult son when my internet went down today. There are things we can do, but there's other things we can't. Turns out they can't fix it. They have to actually send somebody out to my house. So, okay, that's the next possible route. So literally, if we move into the process like that, that's what we're talking about. When we're dealing with our nervous system first, then our brain starts to function better. And so we can bring that curiosity and creativity to the table to work with change. And we're wired to actually enjoy change. That is up higher in the wiring though. So the first wiring is like, oh no. But if we can trigger the second wiring about, oh, this could be interesting and fun, especially if you're like me with a lot of attention issues, I really love novelty. And so a change really plays to my strength. Like I like that novelty and I like to see what's going to happen next. So we're the only ones that actually get to choose how we're going to move forward with change. People say, that my boss or the government or the weather or the housing market or the whatever determined my life. But really, we're the ones that are walking into that change and we get to choose how we move through it. We don't get to choose how the housing market is. We don't get to choose the weather. Those things, we really want to step back from thinking about trying to change them and work with the stuff that we can. And there's some questions that I'm going to go through here, and they are in the email that I send out weekly. And I'll just take a moment right now. If you would like to get the weekly email, you can send me a note to scientistsage, SAGE, @gmail.com. And I will put you on the list for the email that comes out every week. It has some written content to go with these discussions. So the questions are drawn from a number of different places. They're drawn from some shamanic experience, they're drawn from some scientific research, they're drawn from experience in business and working with change there. So literally one of the basic ones, it sounds really strange, but just like what's changing? Because a lot of the time people will say, okay, we're not going to do this anymore. But they don't really give you the big picture of what is changing. Around my house right now, we have to pay to park in front of our houses. And this has been a bit of a challenge, a bit of a challenging change for a lot of people. And so what we really had to find out was what is all the zoning and how much is it going to cost and what are our options and all of those kinds of things. And so we went through all of those things. And at this moment, I've decided not to park on my front lawn. And I will buy a parking permit to park on the street for this year anyway. We'll see about next year. And that was based on those facts. So what is changing? I thought in the beginning, like, no one's ever going to be able to visit me again. That's what I thought was changing. And of course, it made me more distressed. So it really is important to find out exactly concretely what is changing. And then we can go along about, oh, I feel different because this is changing. So that is, what do I feel about these things? My feelings are changing as well when something's changing. There's always emotion. That's just part of the process of change. There's always emotion. And I encourage people to take a really wide look at this too, so that it's not just the reactive emotion that often in the beginning is difficult, but these other emotions like, oh, am I wondering about this? Am I getting shut down by it? Am I opening up by it? How am I feeling? Is it coming too fast? That's often one of the things. And when we feel it's coming too fast, we try and make things go backwards and we resist and create those negative chemicals that affect our brains and our bodies poorly. So really the idea of moving with it. And that moves into the next thing about what do I think will happen as a result of the change? And often our first thoughts about what we think will happen are wildly inaccurate because we are thinking from down here in that amygdala brain, that sort of fearful brain. And so I encourage you to just, work through that part and see if you can generate what are the positive things might be. And then number 4 is really, what do I need to accept about it? There's parts of these things that we cannot change. I'm probably not going to get them to overturn the bylaw about having to pay and park in front of my house. But I don't need to accept that I have to do that. Okay, I can make other choices. I can use my garage in the back. I can, ride my bike instead of use a car. There's many choices I can make. But what do I need to accept? I need to accept that the fact is this bylaw is in place now. And so, okay, that's true. I need to accept I have some resistance to it. And I need to accept what kind of energy I might want to put into doing anything about it. So if we try and resist all of the changes that are happening around us all the time, we won't have energy for anything. And so we really want to be, what are the accepting parts of it? And find ways to move forward into them. And the number 5 is about, what do I feel guided to do in response to this change? And it's down there because I really encourage people to go through the other things first. What's really happening? How do I feel about it? What do I think is going to happen because of it? What do I need to accept about it? And then really sit down and feel for guidance, because a lot of the time it's knee-jerk reactions to that lower brain kind of thinking. But if we really sit and say, okay, open my heart, open my mind, what do I feel I should do about this? And there's interesting things that come there, and it can be so different for every single person, even dealing with the exact same change. And it'll depend on where people are at in their life cycle, even what age they are. It may be dependent on resources that they have. It may depend on options that they have, all sorts of things. So it's very, very different and very, very personal. So it's not like everybody just has to get on the bandwagon about whatever change is going on. It really is a very personal experience, and it matters that you deal with it personally. It matters down to your cells. And so I really encourage this for people, because I had a lot of trouble with that, and I paid a really big price in brain function for quite a few years. So I really encourage you to, just follow that next thing you're guided to, because it may be that you need to really take care of yourself to be able to go through this change. Or when you really work through it, maybe the change really doesn't impact you as much as you thought, and you don't have to put much energy out. So that, and then the very last one is, how might I adapt? Okay. And so that idea of adapting, when you feel what you're guided to do in response to it, that often leads into the best possible adaptation that you can make. And so it might be, one of the recent adaptations I made was I only take work that's quite close to my house. And it simply is that I don't want to spend my time in my car anymore. I want to spend time in my home. And so as that changed for me, I've just worked out the actual, here to there. That's what's going to change for me. That's how I can adapt to changing, working as I'm getting older, and how I can go forward. So there's lots of ideas about adapting to change. Sometimes it is, I work with people in addiction recovery, and there's lots of adapting to do there. And on all sorts of fronts. And we actually write down different lists of what kinds of things they have to adapt to a different lifestyle, they have to adapt to spending time with different people, they have to adapt to a different life plan than they had had. All sorts of things like that. So I encourage that question to be really wide ranging. You know, what kinds of things are going to cause me to have to change a little bit? Like if they suddenly, change the lanes when driving down your street. We have bike lanes where I live, and lots of people are struggling with adapting to those bike lanes. But some people choose to go down different roads altogether. Some people will choose to get a bike themselves, use the bike lanes. Some people will choose to move out to the country where there are no bike lanes. So it doesn't matter what somebody is doing. It literally is, how might I adapt to change? And asking the question in that phrasing helps your brain to start looking for those adaptations. Because if I say, what am I forced to adapt to here? Then my brain starts to fight. When I say, how might I adapt to it? Then my brain goes, oh, I see the assignment, just like an AI machine. Our brain is functioning like that. It's going to go look for the information for us, all the answers we need. So these questions are really useful to go down, and it'll help you to move into responsiveness and out of reactivity more quickly, just using that pattern on different changes you're going through. And just the idea of, acknowledging those things, that's really what this pattern of questions does. It acknowledges what's going on. So we're not trying to say, well, I don't care, I'll just do whatever, because that's shutting down a lot of things. And we want to keep the flow going through our body, through our mind, as much as we want to be flowing with the change that's coming in front of us. And then adapting to those things. And it means so many different things. We want to have positive adaptations. Often people would adapt in difficult ways for themselves and then create more difficulty and more change for their own, that they're not adapting too well. So that idea, and we spoke early about seeking sources of comfort and support, and whether that's people around you, whether that's in being in nature, whether that's taking time internally or something higher than yourself that you connect with, communities you connect with, it's always useful. There are so many big changes happening as we are in the world now, and people say, that many big changes have happened before. I mean, we went from the Ice Age forward and all that, but the awareness of the change and the condensed time of the change is different. And we are going through such quick change, and we are taking in really vivid images of change. And so we might see like the volcanoes exploding in Iceland, and we might see the horrible wreckage in places where there's wars right now, or violent attacks and kinds of things. And those kind of big images of that change, of the climate change things, it causes us to want to live in that amygdala down at the bottom of our brain. So we want to really be aware, seeing that change is this necessary, natural part of life. And this is a necessary, natural part of life, what's unfolding today. And actually, there are some prophecies about this era in time. And the Andes Quechua call this the Pachacuti. And that really is the transformation of worlds. And we are going through a transformation of worlds, things that have been less changed than we could have perceived them as been. They've changed a lot in the last few years. The idea of a pandemic that would be worldwide, like the COVID-1 again. We didn't think that change would ever happen again. The change in the way politics is being approached, the change in climate issues, all sorts of things like that. And so these are there. They are going to continue. And the South American eagle and condor speakers speak of this era as a great peril, but also a great opportunity. And so I really encourage people to keep those things in mind when they're talking about change and not be afraid to go into darkness to find light. I certainly found for myself, as I went through difficulties with my own brain, I found miraculous supports that have taken my life and functioning to levels that I didn't know were possible with the kind of ADD experience I'd had and that sort of thing. And I wouldn't have come to those without these opportunities that changed way back then. So I encourage you to think about it in that way. And there are some suggestions about routes to go through that. And I'm just going to name them, not talk about them, because I want to move into a quick meditation. But relax. Relax in the face of change. It is counterintuitive to what our amygdala wants us to do, but it really is useful. It keeps changing whether the little puppies are saying things outside. So, and reframe this idea of what change is to you. Reframing the idea that change is a bad thing or that it is forced on us, because we can step into it. And reflecting just these questions we talked about, doing that kind of reflection, but also to rest. Change can take a real toll on us. When people make big moves, that sort of thing, change jobs or change circumstances suddenly, it's very, very tiring on the whole system. And so resting is a great thing. And then repeating new behaviors that have come out of the change, because that's really the only real thing that keeps change going, is repetition of new things. So I'm so glad that we got to chat about this tonight. And we're just going to take a few moments to contemplate. And I'm going to have you relax. Put your feet up if you want to. Go off screen if you're with us live. And as always, take a few deep breaths. That has been the basics of change for the Buddhist practices for thousands of years. Change in breathing. And I'd encourage you to really feel this move through your body. That flow of time, that flow of life. You might be feeling a little stiff because you did something the other day. Or you might be feeling tired because it's that time of the day and that changes in your body now. And rather than resisting, just open up to whatever's there. And imagine, just imagine the light force of the universe just moving through your body. A constant flow. And it carries you forward, just like a river. And the scenes around us change. Sometimes it might look dark and scary. Sometimes it's a beautiful open sky. We feel peaceful and joyful. And sometimes we're not sure. We might feel a little anxious. But we can continue relaxing and flowing. And just imagining ourselves being able to open up to change. Allow those responses, those reactions in our bodies, in our minds, to just flow through us. And we get to pay attention to them. They get to inform us. This might be an invitation to something new. This might be an initiation to something new. It might feel a little harder and scarier. But as long as we don't try and stop the flow, we'll be moving forward. Mm. So if you're watching this later, feel free to stay in that meditation as long as you like. And thank you for joining us. And if you're with me live, we'll close this for our viewers later, and then we'll have a little more discussion about this. So good night. I am with you. You are with me. Blessed be.